used to hate China. I was so ashamed of China and I didn't want to be Chinese. But now, oh look, they're an economic superpower now and they're so strong. So yay, I love China now.
一个加拿大人在镜头前问了一个问题，让我看完之后当场愣在原地。他拿出一个 LV 包包问，你这是哪个国家做的？然后又问，这款风靡全球的游戏又是哪个国家出品的？观众几乎全部猜错，因为答案都是中国。这个人是在加拿大土生土长的华裔，从小被西方文化包围长大。他说10年前的自己根本不敢在朋友面前承认喜欢中国文化，只敢一个人躲在房间里偷偷听中文歌，因为那个年代喜欢日本文化、韩国文化才叫酷，喜欢中国会被人当笑话。而那时候那些所谓的自由世界呢，把中国制造视为劣质的代名词，把中国文化扫进边缘角落。全球民调显示2020年前后，美国、德国、印度等西方阵营的主流民意对中国的印象几乎全面崩塌。那些西方媒体精英给中国贴上了标签，永远只有3种面孔，落后、危险，不值一提。没想到短短几年之后，这个加拿大人回头一看，整个世界观被颠覆了。他身边的非华裔朋友开始主动向他推荐中国动漫，主动问他中文梗是什么意思。他在电影院亲眼见证的那一幕更是让他热血沸腾，整个观众席为一部中国动画起立鼓掌。他还对未来5到10年做出了一个大胆预言，关于中国与世界之间那堵高墙将要如何轰然倒塌。让我们来看这个加拿大人到底亲眼见证了什么。
I'm gonna show you something and you can tell me if it's made in China or not. Okay, ready? So this is a Louis Vuitton bag or an LV bag. And a common conception of these bags is that they're made in France or Italy and they are very prestigious and made with the highest quality. But recently I saw this Wired interview with a manufacturing expert that actually says
Chinese factories in particular exposing the luxury suppliers that they were supporting.
They take almost finished bags from China factories and just do the repackaging.
And basically showing, hey, I've got something that is 95% of the way done. Yeah, they may put the label on in QA,
but they market themselves as made in France. 15 years ago, there's just no way something made in China can be this high of a quality and become a worldwide phenomenon. But today, all of these things are becoming very culturally significant. Doesn't matter if you're Chinese or not. And they're widely regarded as really high quality stuff. Now, this has really affected me personally because as a Chinese Canadian, I've always secretly really enjoyed Chinese culture, the Chinese language, Chinese media, but I was never really able to share that love with anyone. So I want to talk to you guys today about what I have observed over the past 10 years, how China has changed, and how I changed with it. And at the end of this video, I want to make a bold prediction of where I think all of this is going. So let's begin the story 10 years ago on my big family trip back to China. To set the stage so you guys know what's happening around the world at this time, iPhone has their factory in China, and there were a lot of news around this time because how much stress they put on these workers and how poor the working conditions are. They actually had to set up nets around the high rises of the office to prevent people from jumping off the buildings. And the country is still struggling with petty crimes like stealing, scamming, and there's still a lot of human trafficking that's happening around the rural areas. So it was definitely not a super safe place to travel to 10 years ago. And during that time, for anyone to be really into Chinese culture or Chinese media is seen as sort of cringe. It's definitely more cool if you're more into Japanese culture or Korean culture, right? Like if you were into anime, you're a big anime fan and 10 years ago was the peak of anime. Or if you're into Korean culture and if you're a big K-pop fan, right? That was regarded as super cool. There's really nothing notable about China at that time, and there's nothing wrong with that. China was not a huge export of their culture at that time. And personally, what I thought about China during this time, first is that the country is still super polluted. Every time I used to go back to China, the air quality was significantly worse than what we have here in Canada, and I can smell the air being different. It just had a different smell. The media that they produce are more geared towards their own taste and their own population, and they weren't really focusing on exporting their culture to the West. There were these groups of people that really wanted to travel to China for humanitarian reasons. They either wanted to offer their services like teach English or bring their expertise or skills to China as a developing country. And the other group of people would never even consider setting foot in China. So this is what China was like 10 years ago. We go on this big family trip, and dare I say, it was maybe one of the worst experiences I've had on a trip. I mean, the whole trip was over 3 weeks long, so there were definitely happy and really exciting moments, but I also had some very poor experiences. The first one being, the city that we stayed in did not have heating. So if you were cold, you can buy your own electric heater at home, but that would be a very small device and it's not going to heat up the entire house. So I remember staying in that city, and that city had its worst winter storm in over 100 years. And the temperature was -3 degrees. That means it's -3 degrees outside, and it was also -3 degrees inside. I remember wearing a hat to sleep every day. I was wearing all of my sweaters and jackets, and I had like 2 layers of quilts on top of me. And I still had a headache every night because of how cold it was. And even if you go to a mall, a restaurant, it doesn't matter where you go, there's no heating. So everywhere was cold. It's like the coldness was inescapable. My uncle took us to this touristic city, which is supposed to have a lot of culture and historical significance. He leaves us for 30 minutes and we get scammed in a temple. So at this point in my life, going back to China was more for visiting my family. It's not that enjoyable exploring. It's not very safe because you could either get scammed or actually get trafficked. There are news of young women who get trafficked and sold to rural villages, and you get sold to them as a wife and your job is to bear kids. And even though at this time I had Chinese things in my life that I enjoyed, for example, there are a lot of great Chinese singers during this time that I would listen to, or there are some really great Chinese shows that I would enjoy watching, but these are not things that I discuss with my friends on a regular basis. I kind of just hid in my own room and I enjoyed these media. And my relationship with China at this time was like, I want to get to know it better, but every time I approach it, I get hurt either emotionally or physically. So I'm too scared to step more into it. And then 2019 hit and we all remember what happened. I feel like the world has turned against China even more than before. And you can't blame them. And this shattered China's image 100%. If we take a look at the survey, that's the global public opinion on China. And orange means a positive attitude towards China, blue meaning negative attitude towards China. Okay, this is the United States. It's kind of like neutral around 06, 07. And then bam, 2020. Look at how dark that blue went to. India, bam, 2020. I mean, Russia for sure always had a positive attitude towards China. Japan, it's just always been negative, I guess. Germany, right? You see the difference between 2019 and 2020. And a lot of creators that used to live in China and made a lot of Chinese content moved back to their country. They basically run away from China. And this period of time created so much discourse, not just between the East and the West, but even between different populations of people in China. People who have lived overseas for more than 20 years have different opinions on people who are here on a work visa or on a student visa. So there was so much stigma around this as well. I'll give you an example. My previous workplace was in this complex with both commercial and residential buildings. And one day they discovered a meth lab in one of the apartment buildings above us. And they actually arrested the guys that were running the meth lab. And I actually witnessed this. They had these guys cuffed and they had them covered in, like yellow hazmat suits because of course, they might be contaminated with traces of meth, and then they were taken onto the police car. But somehow that story got spun into someone died of COVID in that apartment building above us, and their body was covered in a hazmat suit and the police had to take them away. And that actually affected business so much in our area. I mean, I worked in a pharmacy and clinic, so it was a little bit better, but the restaurant owner beside us had it so bad. Like he would have no business for the next 1 to 2 months because words spread across the Chinese community really fast, and something that's just completely untrue, people don't bother to fact check, and people would rather not come into contact with someone that could potentially have COVID and would just not visit their restaurant. So it was a really, really scary and dark time, I think, for all of us. I wasn't ashamed of being Chinese, and luckily I've never been, but just felt frustrating, like why can't anything good ever come from this country that I came from? Why is it always bad press? And why is it always bad representation? But strangely, I think COVID was a turning point for the whole world. Every single country was set back. China was set back, Canada was set back, so did the US, and so did everyone else. And during this time, there's all this uncertainty of where this world was going to go. And a lot of people like me who came from China had this sort of lingering question on our minds. Are we doing better compared to China, or are they actually doing better than us? And nobody knew the real answer. So we see a lot of people who actually moved back to China because of all the Western issues post-COVID, right? Like inflation, homelessness, and all of that. But at the same time, we see a lot of Chinese people who want to move to the Western countries. And as a regular citizen, we're kind of just watching which country is gonna bounce back first and who's gonna get ahead. And I'm not sure what happened, but post-COVID, just in the past 2 to 3 years, China has somehow really glowed up. And if you're an expert in economics or international relations and you know exactly how China got here, please leave a comment and educate me and educate all of us watching, because I don't know what they did, but they for sure turned the world's opinion on it from negative to positive. This is a study from Pew Research Center, and this is supposedly an independent, non-biased research center. And this title is International Views of China Turn Slightly More Positive. In many of 25 surveyed nations, people increasingly see China as the world's top economic power. And this study was from July 15, 2025. So that was only about half a year ago. And I want to say in the more recent half a year, the opinion probably turned even more positive compared to July 2025. So obviously the world's opinion of China quietly changed, and so did I. And this is not a video trying to tell you guys that I used to hate China, I was so ashamed of China, and I didn't want to be Chinese. But now, oh look, they're an economic superpower now and they're so strong. So yay, I love China now. No, that's not what this video is about. Like I said, I've always enjoyed Chinese things, but because it was so niche and nobody else around me understood, it was difficult to share that love with everyone else. But in about 2022, 2023, I started seeing this game called Genshin Impact come up on my timeline on YouTube over and over again. Every single creator I was watching at the time either was playing the game or was sponsored by this game. And for the longest time, I honestly thought it was a JRPG because it looked Japanese, it had this anime drawing style, and it looked really good. Until I saw this one streamer who did a cosplay for a Genshin Impact character, and she was teaching her viewers how to say the names of the characters in Chinese. And that's when I realized, oh wow, this game is Chinese? And then after that, I think it was the whole TikTok refugee movement. TikTok was supposedly getting banned and everyone moved on to Xiaohongshu or RedNote. At that point, I was already on RedNote, which I honestly think is a pretty good platform. It's really authentic. And then in 2025, I think this is when China really just exploded. I was just constantly seeing people traveling to Chengdu and Chongqing, posting about the architecture and how technologically advanced the city was and how different it felt as just a general vibe compared to any Western countries. Then there's Chinese animation like Ne Zha 2 and Fan Ren Xiu Xian Zhuan, and oh my god, Ne Zha 2 really blew my mind when I saw it in theaters. The theater that I went to was packed. I took my parents, and they're usually not movie fans, let alone animation fans, but they enjoyed every single moment of that movie. I could even hear them whispering to themselves during the movie, and I kind of had to shush them a couple of times because I'm like, hey, hey, we can talk about this after. It just seemed like they were really into the movie, and I could feel how proud they were that China was able to put on such a high quality movie for everyone to enjoy. And then this Chinese animated series called 凡人修仙传 that I was obsessed with over this past Christmas break. There are 176 episodes out, and I finished every single one of the episodes within just a 10-day break. Everything from the plot, the character development, the character design, the choreography, the camera movements, and the fighting styles, and just how well everything was animated. It just blew my mind. I just couldn't really compute how China all of a sudden could make something so high quality like this. Like 10 years ago, this is the kind of stuff we were watching. Okay, like this is what China had to offer 10 years ago. And now because of this huge breakthrough, English speakers are now enjoying Chinese media. I suddenly have friends that I could talk to about things that I enjoyed all along. Even from 10 years ago, from 20 years ago. I have a friend at work who is not Chinese, but he is super into Chinese culture currently. He's actually recommending me to watch Lord of Mystery, and he would sometimes send me Chinese memes and would ask me what they are. And I think the strength of your home country really affects your place in this world. And I remember watching a video from Connor, C.VA, and Chris Broad from Abroad in Japan. And Chris was saying that maybe before World War II, people felt like Britain was the superpower of the world. And as a British person back then, people had more pride in their country. People felt more confident if they travel elsewhere. And they would just carry themselves with a sense of strength when they talk to other people. And that's just natural. And after America became the superpower of the world after World War II, and Britain kind of dwindled down, and he feels like it's not in the best place that it can be. British people's attitude kind of changed. They became a bit more cynical and a bit more self-deprecating. They're no longer the world's strongest superpower, and that can just naturally take away people's confidence. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of Europeans think American travelers are really obnoxious. But maybe they're not being obnoxious. They just come from a place where their home country is so strong in the world stage. They travel to another country and they just naturally bring that pride and maybe a bit of privilege to wherever they travel. Their citizens just have that sense of invincibility when you know your country is strong and can back you up. Doesn't matter where you are in this world. So after consuming an ungodly amount of Chinese media over the past few months, like watching every single streamer play the game Road to Empress, watching all of 凡人修仙传. I never even explained the English name of this show. It's called A Mortal's Journey to Immortality. And seeing everyone online going through this very Chinese time of my life, here's something that I think will happen in the next 1 to 2 years. Being bilingual is going to be a huge advantage. Doesn't matter where you are and what kind of job you do. Just from my own personal example, when I'm working in the hospital, there have been countless times where my colleagues will ask me for Mandarin help because we have Mandarin-only speaking patients that nobody else can understand what they're saying. And yes, we do have translation services, but they take time and they're not always the best, and it would be so much more efficient and safe for a pharmacist that's bilingual to offer the service directly to the patient. I think with all the uncertainties from the US, countries like Canada and other countries that were quite pro-US are now thinking, are there any other countries that we could potentially partner with? And China is on the top of that list. For the past 50 years or even longer, there's a huge wave of immigration from China to the Western countries. But now I'm seeing more and more people who decide not only to travel to China, but decide to live there and work there and build a life there. And I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to be really interesting, and we're going to see a lot of crossing of these cultures, and we're going to see people opening up their minds and their views on China, and people in China opening their views about the West. And I think it's going to be a really great time because maybe for the first time ever, we're breaking these huge walls that used to lie between China and the West. And I'm really happy that I'm also a part of this journey, and I want to see where this takes us.
看完这个加拿大华裔的分享，我心里有一种很复杂的情绪，一时之间竟然说不清楚，不是骄傲也不是解气，更像是一种被压抑了很久的东西，终于轻轻松了一口气。 就好像你从小在学校被人嘲笑，默默埋头努力了几十年，有一天班上那个一直瞧不起你的同学突然走过来跟你说，其实你一直都很厉害，是我之前眼光不好，这种滋味我们中国人太熟悉了。这个视频里有一个细节我反复想了很久，他说那些 LV 的包包 95% 是在中国工厂做好的，只是在巴黎贴上了一张标签，就摇身一变成了法国制造。我想直接问一句，这算什么？这就是过去几十年西方世界对中国的真实态度，用你的双手，用你的工厂，让你的工人熬夜赶工，然后把你的名字抹掉，换上他们自己的招牌，告诉全世界，这才叫高端品质。这不是合作，是剥削，而且是带着傲慢的剥削。但现在不同了，2025年7月，皮尤研究中心发布了一份调查，覆盖全球25个国家，结论写得清清楚楚，全球对中国的态度正在悄悄转向正面。越来越多的人相信中国才是这个世界最强的经济体，不是美国，是中国。这个数据不是中国官方说的，是那个一直号称中立客观的西方机构亲口说的。你说讽刺不讽刺？视频里还有一个细节让我印象极深，他说他在圣诞假期用10天时间把《凡人修仙传》一口气刷完了，1期6集根本停不下来，不是因为他是中国人，而是因为那个动画就是好看。这就是学术上讲的文化软实力最真实的状态。这个概念最早是美国学者提出来的，他说美国最厉害的武器不是航空母舰，是好莱坞，是麦当劳，是可口可乐，用文化渗透让全世界主动向往美国。但现在中国正在用行动亲身示范这个概念，原神让全世界的年轻人主动去学中文，学汉字。哪吒2让加拿大的电影院坐满了各种肤色的观众，就连美国人因为 TikTok 被封，都抢着跑到中国的小红书寻找新的家园。话音未落，这个潮流还在继续滚动。这一切背后，我看到的是一种叫做认知失调的崩解。那些西方精英，他们脑子里的世界观一直告诉自己，创新来自西古，艺术来自欧洲，中国只配做代工厂。但现实一个接一个的撞过来，他们的第一反应是打压，是制裁，是把中国威胁论讲得越来越响亮。因为越打压说明越害怕，越害怕说明越珍视。这个加拿大人在视频最后说了一句话，我觉得说得很深刻。他说，一个国家在世界舞台上的强大，会让他每一个身处海外的子民走到哪里都带着一种力量感，一种底气。我们中国人懂这句话，懂得骨子里。那些年多少海外华人压低了声音说话，把民族认同藏进心底最深处，怕被嘲笑，怕惹麻烦，甚至不敢在朋友面前说自己爱中国文化。那个时代真的慢慢的成为过去，历史从来都是这样，真正有文明底蕴的民族不需要靠别人的承认才知道自己的价值，但被全世界重新看见的那一刻却是格外解气，格外大快人心。你们在海外有没有亲身感受到这种变化？评论区见，我想听听大家的故事。